Autism is, to me, is like a three-ring circle. In the middle, we have different types of genetics. Now, we could have a genetic abnormality that happens in utero and during creation where it could cause autism. No different than it could cause somebody to have Down syndrome. The other type of genetic issue is epigenetic. Can they detox toxins correctly? Are they converting nutrients properly? And then you have this other ring, environmental toxins, heavy metals, mold, pesticides, and that can account to about 40 to 50-ish, 55% of autism cases.
Mainstream mental health is flawed, and I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm Andrea Clark, a former family therapist who walked away from the system to expose the truth. After my own journey from medication maze to holistic healing, I'm here to challenge the status quo and reveal the mental health truths most people don't know. The truth about mental health is your radical roadmap to wellness. Raw stories, expert insights, breakthrough solutions. This is where traditional modalities end and real healing begins. Greer McGuinness holds a Master's of Science in Nutrition and Dietetics. She's a registered dietitian, certified detox specialist, certified master herbalist, certified Lyme specialist, and certified mental health specialist. She's based in New York and is the proud owner of Biomedical Healing for Kids, a virtual private practice. She's a dedicated professional, and Greer has made significant contributions to the field of pediatric health. Her expertise lies in detoxifying toxins, enhancing gut health, and optimizing nutrition. As a published researcher, she has focused on autism and alternative medicine, showcasing her commitment to exploring innovative approaches to healthcare. Greer is a trailblazer in her field, having developed the pioneering Detoxing Toxins in Pediatrics course. Through her rebalancing roadmap, she empowers parents and healthcare providers to safely and effectively detoxify toxins in children. By incorporating biomedical testing and integrative treatments, she aims to facilitate the advancement of children's developmental abilities, enabling them to lead active and healthier lives. Greer's passion for his holistic health and her dedication to pediatric well-being make her a respected figure in the realm of nutrition and alternative medicine. We had a powerful conversation. Her story about her son and how she helped him come back from remission is incredible, and I cannot wait for you to learn from her. Let's dive into it. Greer, I am so excited that you're here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I would love to start. You have such an incredible list of accomplishments and certifications and this amazing business and mission. And I'm curious what led you to this point, because we don't just land in a place that you're in, right? There's probably a story or maybe something in your life that led you here. And I would love for people to hear that.
Yeah. So, it's funny. I wanted to be a social studies teacher like my dad.
Okay.
So long story. So I actually used to wrestle. I was actually on a boys wrestling team, and I was going to wrestle in college. I loved wrestling. I just had such a passion for it. And I went to the University of Minnesota Morris, which is near Fargo, North Dakota. And I went out there to wrestle, and I was actually heading to the Olympics. That was my goal. That was what we were wanting to do. I had to declare a major when you become a freshman. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, I just want to wrestle. That was the only reason why I was going to college. I didn't care about a degree. So my dad was a social studies teacher. I was really good in social studies. I was always in AP classes, because my dad would tutor me on the side, and I just had a knack for it. And so I declared social studies, and I wound up getting really hurt 3 months into, getting into college and wrestling, and had to go for an MRI on my shoulder. And I was told that they would not clear me to wrestle anymore. I had damaged my shoulder pretty bad at practice, and I was devastated, really, really depressed. I after the first semester, I got like a C in my social studies classes. And I was like, well, this obviously isn't my path, because obviously I'm not as good as and it wasn't just a passion. Like, I just didn't really care. So I happened to be talking to my sister, and my sister actually was a social worker in the hospitals. And she goes, Greer, you've always been into nutrition and health. And she's like, why don't you become a registered dietitian? I'm like, what the heck is that? Like, I had no idea what that was. She's like, I don't know. She's like, they walk around the hospitals carrying calculators all day, telling people what to eat. I was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. So I switched majors, and I actually moved back to New York and went to SUNY Plattsburgh and got my bachelor's in food and nutrition science, health science, and got an internship with RMark and got my RD's license and started working in the nursing homes for the first, 10, 15 years of my career. And I went back and got my master's after I had my first son. That's kind of where things catapulted. I thought, I liked the nursing homes. They paid well. I had holidays off, and it was an easy job. I got really good at it. And I moved up the ladder and became a chief clinical dietitian within the first 5 years of my career. And that's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life, to be completely honest. Like, it really didn't, and I was happy doing it. It wasn't thrilling, but it was a good job, and I was very good at it. So after I had my first son, everything was going really well until it didn't. And when he regressed around about 18, 19 months. It was like a light switch went off. I had this beautiful, vibrant, happy kid who, there was no red flags, no issues, and he regressed in what we now call autism. And it was like, my mind was blown, like devastated of just what just happened to my life. Like, my whole entire life got turned upside down during that point. And I went back to school and actually got my master's because I was like, I'm missing something. I really wanted to understand the biochemistry, the epidemiology, the research. Like, I wanted to understand this whole entire concept of autism and how this happens. And through that, it was very cathartic for me, just being more educated. Because when you're educated, you have less questions. There's always these questions until you don't have questions. And so after I went back, I got my master's. I started working with my son doing alternative medicine after I found research studies. And it was like I opened Pandora's box, not just for him, but for me. He started thriving, and my husband looked at me one day, goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "I don't know what I did," but I did something.
Yeah.
And, it was kind of one of those things that, so I would come home and I would share with him at dinner, like all the research and all the things I was doing. And one day he looked at me, he goes, "I can't talk to you about this anymore." He's like, "We gotta find something else." Cause he would, I would just come home and be like, and he would be like, "Okay." He's like, "You need to go start like a Facebook group or something." And just, and that's what I did. And I started a Facebook group and I just started sharing. And then parents would come to me and be like, "We need your help. Like, we're stuck. We don't know what to do." And so I started working with families and just sharing, okay, this is what I did. This is where we started, these labs, blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, I was like, I really love this. Like, this was just, and I'm, something that, it was like a silver lining, I guess, for me. It just kind of gave me it kind of lit a fire under me, like something I didn't even know I had. Like, it was like a passion that like just was like unlocked that, I didn't even know existed. And so I told my husband, I said, "I want to quit my job and I want to go look for another job working with a lab company and actually learn how to interpret labs and read labs." And he said, "Okay." Like
you had somebody who's so supportive of this journey.
I think he saw that, it was just like, it was like perfect timing for a lot of things too. Like it worked for us as a family too. And so, yeah, so I wound up getting my first job as a clinical lab educator. And that was like, I got to dive in. I mean, you want to talk about research. I was researching 24/7. Like I was just engulfed in that information and loving it. And I love the fact that I could help other providers, especially either new providers or seasoned providers. I learned from them. They learned from me and vice versa. I specialized just in pediatrics and autism and stuff. And that would, and, now I kind of branched out to like skin and stuff like that too. It gave me what I was looking for. And everything just kind of settled into place, like it was one thing after another. And I opened up my private practice because I was like, I really want to help other families. I was like, if I could just help one family, not have to go through what I went through with my son and start them earlier and, help them earlier. Like if I could just help one kid, I'd be happy. Like, I just wanted one kid, and one kid turned into hundreds and now thousands. So it's actually pretty cool that it's turned into something that I couldn't even have dreamed of. It was just started with one little inkling of just want to try this out and do something different, and it just kind of took off. So it was actually pretty cool. It was not, I always say, I didn't realize this was my destiny until it was my destiny, kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people I interview on this podcast, their story is similar in the sense that they're doing what they do because of a personal story, a personal experience. And I'm really excited for people listening in to understand more about autism. There's so many things out there and a lot of debates. And I'd be curious for you to share your experience with it, right? Your journey with your son, and also just educating people, whether they have a kiddo with autism or they know somebody, a family, right? Because I just think there's a lot of misinformation, and it's dangerous when there's misinformation. And so I don't know if you'd be open to sharing some of that journey and, how you, what your perspective or how you educate families about autism and how it works and the biochemistry behind it and all of that.
Yeah. So, when I was in school, we did the same undergraduate classes with all the doctors and the nurses. So we were, everyone says, you're just a dietitian. Well, we go through the same training. We go through a lot of the same training, especially in undergrad. And then we do internship. We do actually extra. We do a year of internship after our undergrad. I was always taught, and we were always taught, that autism was a delay since birth, and that kids just don't meet their milestones. You kind of know early on, not usually typically later in life. So when my son regressed, I went, and I was very confused. And I went to my pediatrician. I was like, what just happened? She's like, I think you need to go see, call early intervention again. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Because what's funny, here's the kicker. When my son was little, my son has always been small. My husband and I are not big people. So my son was always kind of tiny. Mm-hmm. And they were concerned with his growth and just not growing well. So my pediatrician said, I think maybe let's try, get him evaluated by speech therapy. Just make sure it's not like a feeding thing, an oral thing. And I was like, honestly, but here's the thing. Like my husband and I barely could rub two nickels together right now. If we have to do co-pays, we're going to be in big trouble. And she goes, let's do early intervention. They'll come out, and this was around 9 months, and evaluate him. And if he needs speech therapy, you could get it through early intervention. It's totally free. And I was like, perfect, because we just really couldn't afford $200-$300 a month in co-pays at that time.
Right.
So they came out at 9 months. They evaluated him. No red flags. None. Zero. No concern, except for the fact that I was a new mom and I didn't know I had to change nipple sizes on the bottles. And he was getting tired and fatigued and not eating well because nobody told me that, certain kids, you could move up in ages if they're drinking more, So it was just like a stupid thing that I overlooked because I was a tired working mom. And he goes, well, let's come back out at 15 months. And I was like, okay, perfect. So they came back out at 15 months just to evaluate him. Perfect. No red flags, nothing. So that's how I know my son was not flagging as having any red flags, because they did both assessments on him. I think I had OT and I think I had PT one time doing an assessment to see everything was on point. We had no concerns. There was no concerns with this child until the day he regressed. So we had early intervention come out at 2 years old. And that's where they were like, this was like a massive regression. You know, he lost all of his speech. He's lost his eye contact. He was like screaming from morning to night. Like, I don't know what the heck happened to my child. And I was like, this is not normal.
Right.
And people love to say, well, regression is normal. And I'm like, no, it's not. We're having a normal developing child and say all of a sudden around like 18, 19 months to 2 years old or even later to totally regress and lose everything. Speech, language, eye contact, like that's just not normal. We need to stop lying to parents and explaining, oh yeah, this is science. This is documented. No, it's really not. And trust me.
It's not a signal. It's a red flag.
Yeah. I've tried to look at that science and it's very shady science to say that. There's a big brain jump between 18 and 24 months and any environmental factor thing during that time, even a sickness and illness, antibiotics, anything can alter that child's microbiome and their brain. And I'm a clinical lab educator for a microbiome lab company. I specialize in the microbiome of a pediatric child. I know how the immune system develops. I know everything that happens month to month, you know, on that child. So for me, it was like, I felt like I was being lied to. This is just genetic. Okay, fine. So we went to a geneticist. They must have done 20 vials of blood on this kid and metabolic and looked at everything. And I was like, you know, expecting to get a phone call. Oh, yes, we found this gene. What, you know, and this could account for everything. I remember the geneticist, the secretary called me. She goes, hey, she's like, we got your labs back. Everything was normal. You know, you didn't just follow up with your normal pediatrician. And I was like, wait, what? Now what? You just told me that there was no genetic abnormalities. I'm so confused now. Now what do I do? So that's where I started, you know, looking on other things. And I actually got into the fight with his developmental pediatrician because I think he was like 4 when we went and, you know, he was still not speaking, still not doing everything. And she was just like, you know, keep doing the therapies. It's going to work. It's going to, you know, and I'm like, God, like, you know.
This is what a lot of parents hear. Just keep doing therapy. Just keep doing the therapies.
Yeah. And I'm burnt out. And I'm sure this kid's burnt out. This poor kid's was in school since he was 2.5. I think we were putting him in half day, like a pre-kid ABA therapy program. He was doing ABA therapy in the home, speech therapy in the home. I'm exhausted. Like everyone's exhausted. Like this is just, we're burnt out. Like we've been doing therapy for almost 2 years and we're getting nowhere, nowhere. So at 4.5, I started really going, okay, something's got to change. I can't keep living this life because he's not doing anything. He's not getting better. He's not improving. So we really started doing the biomedical alternative. And that's when I started really trialing things that started working. And I was like, holy moly. Like I just literally unlocked Pandora's box. And we went back to the developmental pediatrician and he was doing great on his tests, like filling out things, coloring, answering questions. And I was just like, God, oh my gosh, like look at what he's doing from last year to this year. So I told her, I said, I started doing all these things. I started working on his gut. I started detoxing him. And she's like, that doesn't work. And I'm like,
sorry, I'm laughing.
No, but I was like, proof pudding. Like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean it doesn't work? I was furious. I was so mad. And I just looked at her and I was like, you're ridiculous. I was like, do you know, I was like, the last 6 months. I was like, this was in 6 months. I'll show you the video. I had an in-home ABA therapist in my home during that time because we were paying out of pocket at that time because he didn't qualify for ABA at school anymore. So I had the ABA therapist in my home that was like the September-ish summer, and his VB-MAP score was like a 56, which was severely verbally deficient. I started detoxing, doing gut work and everything. And by his birthday at 5 years old, his VB-MAP score dropped to like an 8, like a 5 or an 8. And they couldn't believe, you could bring this kid into the kitchen. He couldn't label anything. He wouldn't tell you. If you held up a fork, a spoon, and a knife at 4.5, he'd look at you like you had 6 heads. And then by 5 years old, by that Christmas, like by his birthday, he could answer questions and label pretty much everything. It was incredible to see in 6 months how much that dropped and how well he improved. It was just mind blowing. So when she was like, "Oh no, that stuff doesn't work. That stuff's like a scam," and I was like looking at her, I was like, "Yeah, no." It's like I never went back. I never went back to her. So I was annoyed because I think for me is these are supposed to be the professionals. These are supposed to be the medical practitioners who are supposed to know everything about autism, everything. I mean, I'm talking about if you're supposed to specialize in this and how to help a child, I expect you to know everything, including what you know and outside of that. I mean, why am I the expert in like this whole entire area and you pick and choose what you want to do? You didn't know anything about diet. You didn't know anything about supplements. You didn't know anything about gut health. And I'm looking at her and I'm going, what do you know?
Yeah.
To just give a test and just say, here's a script for therapies. Like that's all you do. That's all you know. Like that's not helpful.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. My husband actually came home really frustrated the other day. He was going to establish with like a new, primary care. And we've been doing some exploring as a family of like genetic testing for methylation issues and some other things. And he asked for some blood work. We've been doing our own research and he asked for some specific blood work in addition to the, typical blood work they do every year. And the doctor was like arguing with him. Well, why do you need that? And he didn't know what diagnoses codes to use for the insurance. He kept bringing up the insurance. And my husband was so frustrated because he's like, look, I need this, and this. I, have, these gene mutations. I want to see what my histamine and homocysteine levels. And the doctor just was like, had no clue. And it's really unfortunate because this is so common. It's like they just function within a very small box of their training. And it's almost like unless they are passionate about expanding their knowledge and looking at a person holistically, they continuously function in this very small box.
That actually happened to me too.
Yeah, it's definitely small.
It's really so one of my family members had a cardiac event. And they were told to let everyone know in the family to go get this genetic marker looked at because it increases your risk for cardiovascular disease. Now, cardiovascular disease in my family is actually really high. So when I went to, and this was only about a month ago, I went to my regular GP and I was like, hey, this happened. They want us to run this genetic marker. And he looks at me and goes, what for? You're going to go on a statin? I said, no, but I'd like to know.
I like that it's tied to a potential like script or it's just like, It's okay. My husband said to the doctor, I want to learn about my body. I want to learn about my levels so I can make decisions accordingly.
Preventative medicine. That's So this is what frustrates me because I told the GP was like, oh, well, we just try to manage this with diet and exercise. And I looked at him and I said, all right, well, let me explain something to you. I work out probably 4 to 5 days a week. Maybe, I hit 10,000 steps a day. I don't eat gluten, dairy, corn, soy. My fat intake is maybe around 50 grams of healthy fats and things like that. I said, so it's not like I'm over here eating McDonald's and, eating cheese like crazy. So when my cholesterol came back a little high, his nurse or whatever calls me to let me know that he would like me to make sure I exercise, avoid red meat, dairy, and some other things. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me right now. Like, he didn't listen to anything I said. He didn't listen to anything I said. And I was like, and I do all those things already. So now what? I was like, you could tell him that I said he was a joke because I was so angry that I spent 30 minutes talking to you, telling you my history, telling you what I'm doing. And then you're going to turn around and give me old, expired 2015 information that doesn't exist anymore and isn't even replicable for what we're doing. So I was very annoyed too. So I understand that even I can't even get half my kiddos' pediatricians to write a vitamin D script anymore just to test their vitamin D. Everybody's low. That's what they say. Everybody's low. And I'm like, well, regardless, we need to know how low. Do we have to supplement a lot? Do we have to supplement a little? Like where are we at? So that's very frustrating because we can't even be preventative anymore. They just don't care.
It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. Why do you think that is? What do you think it is?
It's mostly the insurance companies right now. Their pushback of not wanting to pay for other things. Like you were talking about MTHFR. Well, MTHFR blood work can run somebody up to $2,000 if you're not careful out of pocket.
I am really thankful. The pediatrician I have for my daughter, I took, the test, and she's really willing to learn and work with me, but she had no knowledge of any of this stuff. And I brought everything ready for an argument or like a battle, but she was really good. And she's like, okay, let's try to find some diagnoses codes so that we can get this covered. So there's like a methylation issue diagnoses. And she put, like eczema and some other, which is accurate. She has skin issues. But I was thankful that she was willing to do that. Right. And not all physicians or practitioners are. And it's like experience with my spouse and with you. And, this is such a common thread. And I'm just going back to your son's story, because not everybody has the education you have or even the wherewithal. It takes a lot. I say this on the podcast all the time. It's really intimidating when a practitioner is telling you something as if it is the end all be all black and white truth, and they don't talk to you like you're dumb. It's intimidating. And not everybody has the tenacity and confidence that you have. Like I've had to leave doctor's offices. I've gone into my car and cried because of the exchange with the practitioner and just trying to ask for things and learn things or share my experience and being shut down and then leaving. And it takes a lot because not everybody's educated or they don't trust their intuition, as well or whatever. And so my question is, what would you say to people like that want to be able to advocate, but it's not as easy for them, right? Or they don't feel like they have a leg to stand on?
Well, I'm going to be honest. There are times that I've cried. Okay. So
intense, like, because you feel like it is intense to encounter.
Yeah. We waited 6 months for his developmental pediatrician appointment when he was about 3 years old. I had just found out I was about 7 or 8 weeks pregnant with his little brother when we were at that appointment. And the developmental pediatrician came in. She asked us a ton of questions. She looked him over and she was like, okay, he has level 2 autism. So here's the stuff that you need to do. And we'll see you back in 9 months. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm like, wait, I'm like, what? I'm like, how did we get here? I'm like, are you supposed to test him? Like, you just looked at him. Like, she listened to his heart, she listened to us, and then just gave the diagnosis. And I was very confused. So again, I had my list of questions and she couldn't answer a single one. Oh, this is just how autism is. This is just how it presents itself. And then she didn't know I was pregnant at the time. And she's like, you should get him genetically tested so you don't pass, in case it is genetic, and you don't pass it on to another sibling. And I was like, what? Like, I got into the car and I just started crying because one, I was hormonal, but two, I was like 7 weeks pregnant and now I'm terrified, petrified. And I looked at my husband, I was like, that was the most ridiculous consultation I think I've ever encountered with a physician. So I'm strong now. I wasn't strong and educated back then. That's the hardest thing, is being educated. That's why I encourage all my families to do their due diligence and do their work. And I always try to find resources and stuff to share with my families and stuff so that they have information as well. Because even if you don't, so say for instance, you're in a conversation or in with somebody and you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, we need to pause right now. I need to go do some research and then we can talk about it, or then we can continue this conversation. And that's perfectly valid. I don't know everything. A doctor doesn't know everything. I once had a doctor have to go out and go Google if I could take a certain medication when I was, I think, pregnant or breastfeeding, because he didn't know. So, just realize that, humans are humans. We don't know everything. And it's perfectly acceptable to be like, you know what, we need to put a pin in this. I need to go do some research and then we can come back and connect and reevaluate things. But I always say, the one thing I can always say is never ignore that mom gut intuition.
Yeah.
Never. because there's research that shows that the DNA of your child will be inside you for the rest of your life. You have a connection with that child that nobody else will ever understand. Your spouse will never understand it. Nobody else will ever understand that connection that you share with that particular child. And you know that child inside and out. And if you have a feeling, an inkling, anything, follow it. Just follow it. And that it will never steer you wrong. I promise you. If your gut is telling you to don't do something, don't do it right now. You can always do something later. You can't take it back. So if it's telling you to like, wait, don't do something right now, put a pin in it, and just come back and visit it later when you feel more educated on it.
Yes. So going back to your son and your story and the incredible transformation that you all have walked through, can you explain like what biomedical testing is and how that has played a role in his healing? And second part is, how do you explain autism to be like the cause of autism, right? Because in Western medicine, it's just like, oh, this is just genetics.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer that part first, because then we'll go into the second part. So autism is, to me, is like a 3-ring circle. Okay. So in the middle, we have genetics, and we have different types of genetics. Now we could have a genetic abnormality that happens in utero and during creation, where it could cause autism, or just no different than it could cause somebody to have Down syndrome. It's a genetic abnormality that happens and occurs in utero. And that would be one type of genetic issue. The other type of genetic issue is like what we were talking about, MTHFR, then we call that more epigenetics. So how genetics play a role in that person's biology and biochemistry. Can they detox toxins correctly? Are they converting nutrients properly? Those types of things. And that's a different type of genetic abnormality that could occur and cause somebody to maybe develop autism-like symptoms. So that I always put in the middle, because genetics is your basic human biology. Now, we could also have a metabolic condition, which accounts for anywhere between 10 to 15% of autism cases. And metabolic could be just oxidative stress, conversion of sugar, carbohydrates. There could be just something that happened where something doesn't convert from A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. That's more metabolic. And then you have this other ring on the other side, which is environmental. So environmental toxins, heavy metals, mold, things like that, pesticides, toxins, and that can account to about 40 to 50-ish, 55% of autism cases. What's funny is people don't think that we know now that is causing some autism-like symptoms. And this is where I say there's a genetic form of autism, and then there's autism-like symptoms that cause autism. For instance, if we just look at one toxin, we'll use lead because it's one of the most well-known studied heavy metal that's out there. Back in the 1960s and 70s, lead was predominantly used in so many different things. It was used in gasoline. It was used in paint in your home. It was used in toys. And kids were being highly exposed, where I think it's something like 800 million IQ points were lost during that time because of lead exposure for these children from products from the 60s and 70s. We also have new information about just phthalates, like plastic endocrine disruptors. So parents, moms who had really high levels in utero, their kids had a 7.1%, those who didn't have high amounts in mom during utero. So we know that these toxins individually are causing problems. I wonder what it's like all together. Well, that's a problem. So when you go to a doctor, if you went to a doctor and you said, hey, I want to test my heavy metals or, glyphosate, they might look at you like you have 6 head. Now they might do blood testing for heavy metals, because we still do that usually around the age of 1 or 2. Kids at standard usually practice in the United States that we will still test kids for lead levels. Because it's still a problem. It still can be a problem, especially in older homes. So we still do tests for some of them. The downfall is with blood testing is the half-life of those heavy metals don't circulate in the system for a long period of time. So up to 7 to 14 days, it'll be in the blood until it goes and finds a happy home in your bones and your tissues and your organs. So it might not be circulating in your serum. So when you go to a doctor and they do regular, they'll say, oh, we got to do some basic labs. That's a CMP, a BMP, and they're basically what we call cookie cutter labs. They're just basically like a really broad throw a net, see if something comes back, maybe a lipid panel, maybe an iron panel for some kids, and see what comes back, which typically it's always fine, which is ironic considering that autistic kids like usually have tons of nutrient deficiencies, horrible gut issues, and so many other health issues, and their labs always come back perfect. So using functional labs, it's labs that look at different things. Okay. One is a microbiome stool test. It looks at your microbiome, and they're starting to do this now, even with the older population. Instead of doing colonoscopies, you have like Cologuard. They're looking for certain markers to see if you're at a higher risk for colon cancer. So we use microbiome lab tests, and I can assess my patient's microbiome. I know their diets, very easily from looking at poop, their microbiome species, if they've got inflammation, if they've got parasites and things like that. Things that, normal doctors aren't screening for because they just don't, I don't want to say they don't care, but it's not covered by insurance. So it's not anything that is preventative medicine. So between that and toxins, a lot of my kiddos have tons of toxins, heavy metals, mold, environmental toxins, which is a urine test. And we test those, and those have reputable ranges from NHANES research studies, because I remember it helping putting all that together and doing all the research. So there's research out there to show what reference ranges should be typically like, and what should be high, what should be low, or what should be acceptable. So these tests are kind of out of the norm. They're not covered by insurance, and they're not typically recognized, which kind of stinks. And hopefully one day it will be, because I think they're vital for kids, especially on the spectrum. And it helps kind of guide us onto how to help the child. What's imbalanced in that child, and how do we rebalance them? So just because it may or may not be a genetic factor, it doesn't mean that a child still can't be helped and supported by their nutrition or detoxed or anything along those lines.
So when you work with a family and it's mainly a genetic factor, how do you work with them? Because they're still most likely going to be having heavy metals or parasites, right? Like there's still things that are making symptoms worse, right?
Yeah. And that's where we have like what we call comorbidities. Okay. So someone could be autistic and it could be genetically related, and that's okay. But the comorbidities could be they're not sleeping. They have severe constipation. They have severe anxiety. They are aggressive. They are self-injurious. So, and that's why, no two kids with autism are the same. So is it, they could have autism, and that's perfectly okay. It's the comorbidities that make them uncomfortable in their own body that is making their autism worse. So instead of saying they're not sleeping, that's just a part of autism. Well, not always, because not every single autistic person is having sleep issues. So why is it this person having, sleep issues? Well, maybe they're very low in iron. They don't eat any meat. They don't eat well, so supplemented with iron, all of a sudden the kid starts sleeping well. Well, it wasn't autism. It wasn't just because he has autism that happened. He has autism that maybe caused picky eating, poor nutrition, nutrient deficiency, gut imbalance, and then that leads to iron deficiency. So, take autism out of the equation and just look at them as a person and as a human body.
So that's incredible. And it's interesting because I think what happens when parents get a diagnosis, when anybody gets a diagnosis, then a lot of times we want to lean towards just looking at ourselves through that framework.
Well, we use it as an excuse.
Yeah. Or it's almost, or it's like comforting, like, okay, all of this makes sense now because this is my diagnosis, and it's just, we have to start looking at our children and ourselves as a whole person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? my son screamed from morning to night. He was severely constipated. He was just miserable. And, this is autism. This is just because he's autistic. I'm like, there's just no, like, I couldn't get the kid to eat. He wasn't growing. He wasn't gaining weight. And I'm sitting there going, Well, like you're just giving me a diagnosis and saying he's autistic and this is why, but that's not helping this. Like this isn't helping me. You're just putting a Band-Aid and saying this is autism. He'll grow out of it. Well, a year or so later, we still haven't grown out of it. And at what point do we grow out of it? Or what point do we go, okay, he didn't grow out of it. Now what? So I stopped listening to the excuse of he's just autistic. And that's why. It was just not an excuse anymore.
So tell us just a little bit about some changes you made for him. It sounds like you
We've done a lot. Yeah, we've done a lot. Yeah. So one of the biggest things was getting him gluten-free, which just happened this past year. Finally, he was in the Duke study for ARFID. So he does have ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive feeding food intake disorder, which is beyond a picky eating. He's not just a picky eater. He is he used to get severe anxiety around food. He never wanted to eat, try food. So getting him gluten-free was, just tremendous and so helpful. And I wish I did that way earlier before I realized that gluten was a huge issue for him. We worked on his gut for a very long time, working on, he had tons of antibiotics early on too for ear infections, and he had yeast overgrowth. Parasites, he was just a mess. So we really worked on his gut detox. He had tons of heavy metals in his brain and getting rid of those. We've done a lot of different things. We've done, stem cells with Duke University for the clinical trial. We were in that, which was amazing. We've done True Dose, which is PRP platelet therapy, which was amazing. We've done Malillo method, brain balance, which was amazing. So we've done a lot. And, parents, you have to kind of go and guide by your kid and how they respond to treatment and things like that. Again, Keegan was older when we started this. And I always wonder what happens if I wish I would have known what I know now back then. And I could have started way earlier. The earlier, the better. But then we started later and we still saw amazing improvements. So I don't think there's always an age limit, but he's doing amazing. He's still classified as being on the spectrum. Totally fine by me. I don't care. He's very high functioning, and he's going to live an amazing life. And that was the only thing I ever wanted him. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to not be in pain and to thrive. And that was the whole reason why I did this from the beginning.
That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about how things are going now. I see your posts, but what is life like for you as a family and for him now?
He's so funny. And he's 11 now. So we're getting a little cheeky with our responses. We're getting some sassafras on that, and I'm not prepared or ready for it. He said something to me the other day. He's like, "What? You didn't hear me?" And I was like, check yourself. Who are you talking to? Yeah. Keegan has always been a very sweet, lovable kid. And it's just so funny to see this personality coming out, which is totally age appropriate. He, wants his privacy now. He wants to be left alone and do things on his own. He just, he loves asking questions, and he has an amazing memory. Oh my gosh, he has such a memory. Listen, our life isn't perfect, and I don't think any family is perfect. We still deal with some issues here and there, where one of the biggest things that we're dealing with now with him is this. He assumes everyone's kind of out to get him or be mean to him and pick on him. He's been bullied a lot because he's been different. So he has a hard time associating. It's almost like a disassociation condition, which is very common in autistic adults that I've been reading about more and more, where if you try to call your friend and they don't call you back, you automatically think they hate you.
Yeah.
Or, you're playing a game and you get tagged out. Now you think everyone's out to get you and nobody wants to be your friend. And that's going to come with time, age, and just support. But, he has been bullied a lot. He does get picked on a lot. And so that I can kind of see where that comes from, where he has that disassociation, and it breaks my heart because he is just such a lovable kid. I just think kids can kind of pick on the fact that he is slightly different than they are to a certain degree. And they just do what they do. So, but I mean, other than that, I mean, he's going into integrative classes and he's holding his own. He's behind a little bit with reading and English, and he gets a tutor and we support him. I mean, I was too when I was a young kid too. So, so from where we were to where we are, I couldn't ask for anything.
I mean, sounds like a typical kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting. So we have a lot of, friends, we had made a lot more friends with my youngest in the neighborhood. And I was talking to one of the moms. We were at the beach and she asked, Keegan said something silly or something. And I was like, Keeg. And he laughed and she started laughing and we were talking. I said, well, he's autistic. And she goes, no, he's not. So it's like, no, he is. And she goes, are you sure? I said, I swear I'm not making it up. So, it's a lot of times people can't even tell and they wouldn't even know unless maybe you started really talking and having a conversation. You'd be like, okay, like he's a little off. But like most people can't tell that he is or isn't, which is fine, but that's one of the things that I'm starting to understand more about those who are very high functioning is this is how easily they get often overlooked and they don't kind of get the support or the help they need because they're so high functioning, but there's still some areas of deficit. There's still some areas that need to be supported and it's a real thing and it really needs not to be overlooked.
Yeah, it sounds similar to, not saying it's the same thing, but a lot of girls or young women who share how they have, they're neurodivergent and they flew under the radar, right? Yeah. And they didn't get the support they needed growing up because they were high functioning and over functioning in other areas.
Well, the criteria was never meant for them. The criteria of autism has always been based on boys. Girls are very different. Girls are usually very articulate, very conversational, and it's only when they're not do they get flagged as autistic or, having autism. It's the girl, those girls, they're called, they have like a name. It's like unseen, like they were unseen at that time because the description of autism for boys is very specific. And if they didn't fit that description, they wouldn't be flagged, but girls are very different in their symptoms. And I have like a free workbook where I actually compare the two and I show what are typical signs more in boys and what's more typical in girls. And it's actually very different.
That's incredible that you created that resource for families. If you have a neurodivergent or sensitive kiddo who experiences big emotions and are looking for a way to help them decompress, get grounded, and self-regulate, you've got to check out Outtree. As a therapist and mom, it's my go-to for sensory soothing tools. My daughter loves their sensory swing. After a long day at school, it's her favorite for relaxing and getting focused. It's a safe space to down-regulate her nervous system. You can find the perfect sensory tool for your kiddo and family at outtree.com. OUTREE.com. Use my code MHM for 24% off. You can also check the show notes for the link. So tell us a little bit about the work you do, right? Like you kind of have explained through what you did for your son, but a family comes to you, and by the way, you have to go follow her page. It's incredible, the resources that you provide and the information that you provide. I picked a glutathione for my daughter based on one of your posts recently in the last, I think it was a month. And so a family comes to you, and do you start with testing? Is there like a standard test that you do?
What I usually do is I start with an introduction call because I need to understand what's going on with this family, where they're at. Because some families come to me, I'm their first stop, I'm their middle stop, or I'm their last stop. So I don't know where they are. So we usually do no different than when you go to see a doctor. Like, let's on board, let's get you in, let's fill out all this information. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. You're going to, we're going to fill out the information, and I'm going to say, okay, this is where I think we should go with testing. Now, the biomedical world with testing, there's a lot. There's a lot that you could do. I mean, you could do Lyme disease, you could do neurotransmitters, organic acid. I mean, there's a lot of testing, and this is where parents get bogged down because they start trying to pick and choose and they don't do it in the right order either. So we typically go, okay, let's start with these 2, 3, 4 tests. Let's just see what happens. Here's a list of labs that I'd like your doctor to run to get it covered by insurance. Because if we can use insurance, let's use insurance. And then we'll meet again and go over all the labs, and I'll break it down in a Cliff Note version and explain what's going on in your child's body. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we put a plan in place. We figure out individualized based on the labs, what supplements your child needs. And then we kind of go from there.
That's incredible. How long do you typically work with a family? Is it like 3 months, a year? Is it dependent on what's going on?
Depends on what's going on, how bad the child is, what they're testing, because sometimes things come back and they're not terrible. And it's like, okay, so this is foundation. So some families are now branching off into wanting to do other things. Regardless if you want to do stem cells, brain balance, true dose, anything else, you really have to do the foundation first anyways. So I've had families work with me for 2-3 years. I've had families work with me for only 3 to 6 months because that's all they needed from me. I mean, I'm here to serve my families. So it doesn't matter to me. I'm just here to help whenever and however I can. So, some families work with me for a few months and we correct the issues and they move on to something else. Some families are getting ready to do stem cells and they need to get the system in check. And that's what we do. So it just depends on the families and, what they need from me.
So just to kind of summarize what I'm hearing, like the foundational things would be getting the microbiome balanced. If there's parasites or infections or candida, getting, I'm assuming, minerals balanced, right? Getting some core nutrition in place. And I'm not sure if there's anything else that you would consider.
Usually toxins like heavy metals, mold, environmental toxins. Up to 70% of people who live in a house or an apartment have mold. So, doing those toxin testing, I mean, I found mold in people's houses that they didn't even know they had. So, and then depending on your location, Lyme disease is really big. If you're depending on your kid's behavior, we might need to rule out PANS and PANDAS, strep infections, other infections. I mean, again, this avenue and this world is so big. This is why I go a lot on history, symptoms, where we're at, and then we try to identify the testing that's the most appropriate for that family without them having to try to spend literally thousands of dollars just going crazy on their own.
And then can you just share a little bit about the benefit of stem cells? Because I honestly have never heard about that.
Yeah, so it's not legal in the United States currently. Okay, so most people go to Panama or Tijuana for stem cell treatments. We did it with Duke University. They were doing a clinical trial and they had several trials going on. This was several years ago. And they were trying to see if there was improvements because again, people travel to Panama and Tijuana for stem cell treatments. And I don't know if they allow, especially in Panama or Tijuana, I don't know if they allow your own stem cells. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. If you banked your cord blood, we had donor stem cells. And so stem cells essentially can help regenerate. And it's approved in the United States for several different things like cancer and things like that. And it's really amazing benefits at regenerating the body and supporting the system. The goal is that stem cells, especially maybe even early on with autistic individuals, that it could help regenerate brain growth and brain function.
Amazing.
So again, there haven't been tons of clinical trials on stem cells, which is why I think Duke was trying to do that. I hope and I wish Panama and stuff will do it, but there are several Facebook groups about it if people want to learn more information about it. It was a pretty incredible experience for us, and I'm really happy that my son was able to be a part of that clinical trial. And, our goal and our hope was one day that it can be legal in the United States for families that they want it.
So as somebody who does so much research and you look at so many studies, I'm curious what your perspective is on, because you put your son in a clinical trial. So clearly you understand that sometimes there are things that can be helpful that don't have a ton of research to back it yet, right? And I'm wondering your perspective on this, because a lot of times when families go to practitioners who have that very narrow scope or understanding, a lot of times they'll say, well, where's the research? There's not enough clinical data. And it's like almost kind of like a weapon to just make people compliant or to stop asking questions. And so I'm curious your perspective on that as somebody who lives in this world where you're experimenting, but also, research is important and clinical data and all these things. Like, what can you share a little bit about your perspective on that? And
yeah, with anything, there's pros and cons with anything. I mean, one of our family members had cancer twice, and then they wound up with they did stem cell therapy, and he has been amazing ever since. So we know from other research studies that stem cell therapy in certain situations, I've seen it in ALS. I've seen it in cancer. I've seen it done in other disease states and the impact that it can have. It just because there might not be research in stem cells and autism specifically, it doesn't mean there wasn't research in other areas that I could go look at and research and go, okay, I can kind of take that and then kind of apply it a little bit here. Is it safe? Are there side effects? Is it dangerous? So if to me, stem cells for cancer is approved in the United States, stem cells for ALS is approved for the United States. I have even seen some cases stem cell in Alzheimer's disease is approved in the United States. So if we're looking at neurological disorders, why couldn't it be applied to autism as well? So there will always be pros and cons. Things are scary. Don't get me wrong. I was a nervous Nelly. I was still nervous. I won't lie and say that I was unaffected. It's still my kid, and I prayed, I read, said, if it wasn't meant to be, I don't think we would have gotten into the study. So I have to always say to myself that things that are meant to happen usually happen the way that they're supposed to happen. And we just happened to get into the study. Like, it was a last minute thing too. We applied last minute, we got in, and we were like fast tracked in because of where Keegan was and how badly they wanted him in that trial. So I had to take that as a divine intervention there for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and some of what I'm hearing you say, at least, is from my perspective, is if you have this instinct, right, as a parent, as a mama or as a parent, and you're doing all this research and you're going down all these rabbit trails and you just have this knowing, right? Don't give up on that. Don't just listen to somebody who tells you, oh no, that doesn't work, or, this is the only path. And
yeah, we're in we call it the biomedical world. So the biomedical world for autism, find somebody who actually specializes just in autism or ADHD, because this is what we do day in and day out. This is what we see. This is what we deal with. So, if there's an inkling that there's just this thing that you feel like you could be doing more, you want to do more, we're here. I have tons of free resources for my families that I've created because I needed those free resources when I was going through this, and I wish I would have had it. So I always try to create things that I wish I would have had.
It's amazing. Okay. Do you have any closing thoughts for parents listening in, or people who have loved ones and they're going to be sending this to them saying, you have to listen to this? Just kind of maybe a glimmer of hope or a last encouraging thought about really trusting what they're feeling about whatever it is. Like,
yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say, and this may not be completely related, don't ignore the good times. There are so many times that I felt like, oh, I can't take him out in public. We can't go do this because he's going to run around crazy. And there were so many missed opportunities and memories because I just felt insecure, and I felt that I was a bad parent and nobody's going to understand because he's autistic and this, that, and the other thing. I want families to always feel like, there's light at the end of the tunnel. There really is. And regardless of where your child is going to fall, enjoy every single memory, because I can't get those memories back. I can't get those years back.
That's actually a really powerful insight, because I think people are so focused on figuring it out, or this is so hard, that you can very easily miss the really positive things and being present in the moment, right? And that's with anything, but specifically with this. And so I think it's incredible. The work you're doing is incredible. Everybody needs to go check Greer's page out, and everything will be linked in the show notes. So you can just directly access her and all of her just insane information that she gives. And I'm really thankful that you said yes to me being on here and just sharing all of this insight. And I think it's going to give a lot of people a great starting off point to explore more what tests or different avenues they can take, listening to that gut feeling that they keep getting, but they didn't know the next step.
Yeah.
I hope that they take the next step with you, or at least come to your page and start to discern what that next step might look like. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys in the next episode. I am eternally grateful you tuned into The Truth About Mental Health. If this message matters to you, please spread the word by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with someone who needs this knowledge. Let's keep reclaiming our mental health together.